Well, I have just gotten back from watching the new horror movie Backrooms, and I just have three words to say to the director Kane Parsons. What the f? So yes, that is right. I have now seen the Backrooms movie, and holy moly, I don't even know what to say. It was like one of the craziest movies I think I've ever seen. Not really like I know I kind of say that with like every horror movie, but that's just because I've been getting a lot more into horror movies recently because I obviously reviewed Obsession, and I'm sure there are other horror movies that I've seen, yeah, like Hard Eyes and stuff like that. So I've been getting more into the rated R horror genre type thing because, like, back in the day, I was not a horror guy. Like, you show me a horror movie, I got PTSD from that. Like, I was not touching no horror movies. But ever since I was like 19 or so, I've kind of been getting into them a bit more. And this is the latest one that I've seen, the Backrooms movie. And there was a lot of hype around this Backrooms movie. There's a pop up on my screen I gotta get rid of. But there was a lot of hype around this Backrooms movie because I think it premiered at like a festival or something like that a couple months back. And people were saying that it was like, a crazy movie and that it was insane. And now finally having sit down and watched it, yeah, that shit was kind of insane, not gonna lie. So basically, we follow this character whose name. Oh, Clark. I was like, I don't remember the name of the character, but we follow Clark, played by Chiwetel Ejiofor, and basically, he is just like this kind of down on your luck guy who has this furniture store. It's not really doing too well, like businessly. It's not really doing that well. So, he's kind of like he doesn't really have like anyone to go home to. I mean, the furniture store is technically his home. Like he sleeps at the furniture store because he was kicked out of his own house by his wife. And at the start of the movie, you kind of feel bad for him. Like he's at this therapy session with this woman who's Mary. Mary was her name. I almost forgot her name, but her name is Mary. He's at this therapy session with Mary, and they're talking, and you kind of feel bad or like kind of feel bad for him because of this therapy session that they're having. But towards the end of the movie, yeah, you're kind of like, you know what? I don't feel bad for you no more. Your ass is crazy. So, too bad, so sad. Because literally, he goes in like this downward spiral. I don't know what it is. It's like the same trend with every horror movie. I don't know why this happens to be like a trend in horror movies, but it always seems to like the main character in every horror movie just can't live. Like, I don't know what it is with horror movies. Freaking another pop up. What the hell is going on here? I don't know what it is with horror movies. I don't know if this is like a common thing in horror movies, but like the main character, if you were asked as a main character in a horror movie, you're cooked. There's like a 90% chance that you're either cooked or you have PTSD. Like, literally, I don't know what it is with horror movies and being like this because with regular movies, if you're the main character, you got plot armor. You're good. You don't gotta worry about nothing. If you're a main character in a horror movie, you're done. You ain't living through that shit, and if you do, your ass got PTSD for life. It is like the crazy. I don't know why this is a thing for like horror movies, but it is like the funniest thing ever because basically this guy Clark, he's like just living life at the furniture store, kind of depressed. I'm not gonna lie, and he ends up finding the entrance to the back rooms, and I don't really know how. Basically, there was like these lights or like these switches on his breaker, and if you like turn them off or on, because his like power is like going out in his store, so he has this guy come and like check it out, and the guy's like, "Oh, what the hell's going on here? You got like these random three like switches on your breaker that don't really connect to anything." But then you find out they connect to the back rooms. How do they get there? Who knows? You don't really get the answer to that question. You're just kind of left up to imagine how that got there. But yeah, he ends up like flicking those three light switches that are connected to his breaker, and he finds the entrance to the back rooms. And I just find it so funny how like anytime someone finds something mysterious or anything like that, they're like, I'm gonna go check that out. And me, if I saw a random line that was like, not where it should be, I would be like, hell no, and I would avoid that shit at all costs because, like, he ends up going into the back rooms, he ends up walking around it, he finds the entity or he ends up discovering that there's like this entity creature thing there, and he just keeps going into it. He ends up going like this downward spiral, and to where, like I said, at the start of the movie, you kind of root for him. You're like, you know what, this guy seems like a good guy. He seems kind of, mistreated, and you root for him. You want him to like, you know, get a happy life. But then, oh, but then it changes completely. Bro does a complete 180 because he finds the backrooms. He keeps exploring, exploring. He then gets these two employees that he has to go with him into the backrooms. They're like this couple, Kat and Bobby are their names. They end up going into the backrooms with him, and they immediately die. They're in that backroom. They're in that backrooms area for like probably a good 5 minutes, and then they dead. And he doesn't even like feel bad for them or anything like that. Like he kind of feels bad for Bobby because Bobby is like the first one to die, because it's kind of like what we've seen in the trailers where he goes, or Bobby is attached to this rope. He goes down like this steep like area, and he finds this like place with like laundry and stuff, and he's like, oh, that's kind of weird. And then he discovers the entity is just chilling in that area that he went down into. So he's like, oh shit, you gotta pull me up. So they pull him up, and they're all like, yeah, we're good, we're fine, we're fine. And then 2 seconds later, the rope just starts getting yanked by the entity. Like the entity just starts yanking that rope down, and yeah, Bobby's ass is cooked. He dies. He dies like right away. And so Kat like runs after him, obviously, because even though he's quite literally already dead, she runs after him anyways, because I guess it's, well, I mean, they were a couple, so she obviously cares for him. So she runs after him, and Clark is all like, no, where are you going? Come back. And then it's not really explained what happens, but I think it is implied that Clark is the one to kill Kat, because we end up finding later on, after Mary discovers the backrooms, because, she's concerned that Clark is now missing their appointment, so she goes to the furniture store, checks it out, what's going on. There's these dang pop-ups that keep appearing on my monitor, so I gotta just get rid of that. Yeah, she goes to the store to see what's going on, and then she finds the taped wall where the backrooms entrance would be. So she goes in there, and then she's like looking around for Clark, and what I like about this movie is the fact that like it keeps you on your toes. Like you have no idea when there is going to be a jump scare, because there are jump scares in this movie. There is a whole lot more jump scares in this movie than in the last horror movie that I went to, Obsession, which I don't know if I like Obsession more or this movie more. I think I am leaning more towards Obsession just because that movie was a bit more creepy. It gave a bit more of a creepy atmosphere and vibe, whereas this one was like very slow compared to Obsession. Like Obsession has like this, kind of fast paced, but not really fast paced, whereas this movie, you're gonna spend like about 60 to like 50% of the movie with characters just like walking around and like checking out stuff. So there's not really a whole lot going on up until Mary goes into the back rooms. That is when shit starts getting real, because she is walking around looking for Clark. She is like walking around all these rooms, and then one thing that I like about this movie is the fact that every time a character is like walking around in the back rooms, you're just looking in every corner, every direction to see if you can see something, because I think there are sometimes like characters that are like hidden in the shadows. I'm not entirely sure, because there was this one scene where Mary's walking around and she walks past the backward stop sign, and it focuses in on the backward stop sign at like a certain angle, to where on the left hand side it kind of looked like there was a person standing there, and I think it might have supposed to have been Clark, but I don't really know if there was a person there, because it was just showing the angle of the backward stop sign for like 5 seconds. That is another thing this movie does. There's a lot of like moments where it just like shows a blank screen for like 5 to 10 seconds, and you're just sitting there waiting for something to happen. You're like, is there gonna, what is with all the, I keep getting a pop-up like every couple minutes. Yeah, anyways, there's like multiple scenes where there's like 5 to 10 seconds of just like a blank space, whether it's like a door or like just like a certain angle where it just shows that angle for like 5 to 10 seconds, and you're just sitting there waiting for either someone to come into the door or a jump scare to happen. And I kind of like that, because it always keeps you on your toes, just like with Obsession. but in a bit of a different way. Like there's not really any music during that scene, so you're just sitting there waiting for something to happen. Sometimes there are jump scares, sometimes it's just characters opening up a door. So yeah, it does keep. I have my microphone there. It does keep you on your toes a lot throughout the movie. But like I said, Mary walks past the stop sign and it shows the backward stop sign for like 5 to 10 seconds. And I think there was a person in the corner there. I don't really know for sure, but it did kind of look like there was like feet on the ground to where I think, like I said, it might have been Clark or something else. But yeah, she's walking around looking for Clark, and then she finds this like wall with like these that's like paintings and stuff, and then she turns around and again it shows like an area of a room for like 5 to 10 seconds, and then it cuts back to her, and then it cuts back to that area, and you see a figure move, and you're like, oh, what is that? And then it was revealed that it is Clark, and that he survived this encounter with the entity, and and then you discover that the entity is like this version of this like mascot at Clark's store. I think it's called like Captain Clark or something like that. But yeah, the entity is like this manifestation of like Clark and like his trauma, I guess. I don't really know how to describe it because he or she ends up being like trapped in this other room where there's this one guy, there's like this other woman, and then there's this another dude in like a wheelchair, and their faces are all messed up. And Clark's talking to her about how like this area like takes someone who has been in the back rooms and who has escaped, and it just kind of like makes like this clone of that person, but with like a few details wrong because their faces are all messed up and all that, and they don't really talk or anything like that, and they're just sitting there and they don't feel any pain. And one of the funniest moments in the theater for me was when the mashed potato scene. I think we all know what the mashed potato scene in the movie was. It is the scene where he's like, "Oh, the best part is you can even eat these people," and then he takes a like chunk out of one of the guy's stomachs, and I was just sitting there with my popcorn in hand. And when that scene happened, I was like, okay, we're gonna put our popcorn on the ground now because I don't feel like eating my popcorn during this scene. And that was like the funniest moment in the theater for me. But yeah, basically what happens is the entity then comes into the room, and Clark is all like, we don't have to change, we can stay exactly how we are. And it is at that point when you're like, all right, man, I've been rooting for you for like most of this movie, but now you're kind of crossing the line a little bit, and you should probably die. And then, sure enough, like 5 seconds later, the entity grabs him and just eats him because he was all like, "Oh yeah, look, you can even eat the people in the room." So the entity's like, "I bet," and he eats him. So yeah, Clark, you kind of did that to yourself because entity was chill. It was just chilling with you, hanging out. But then once you told other people that you can eat people, the entity said, "I bet," so I'm going to eat you. And he did. And then Mary ends up escaping and ends up finding the lab people because you know how it is in the backrooms where there's sometimes like these people who are scientists and they work in like labs and stuff. And so yeah, Mary ends up discovering the people in the labs or with like the hazmat suits. She ends up finding those people because she ends up right after Clark dies, the backrooms kind of like manifest the store that Clark worked at into the backrooms. Like she finds like this whole like maze area of rooms and stuff, and I remember there was a scene where like a chair like fell into like this pit, this very long, deep pit, and I was kind of sitting there thinking like, I wonder if she's gonna jump into the pit. Like I'd be kind of tempted to do that. I'm not gonna lie, but yeah, she ends up going up these flight of stairs, and it takes her to the furniture store that Clark works at, but it has now been consumed by the backrooms because I'm guessing what happens is once a character in the backrooms dies, the backrooms kind of like manifests the like character's recent memories or something like that, and turns the backrooms into their recent memories, so that Clark is now dead, and the backrooms takes Clark's memories and turns it into the backrooms. So now Clark's furniture store has been consumed by the backrooms, and Mary ends up fighting this entity creature in that room, and then she ends up escaping, finds the lab people, and then she leaves the backrooms, question mark, because this guy Phil is talking to her, and then it cuts back to the backrooms, and then it shows Mary in the backrooms, but her face is all deformed, meaning that Mary escaped the backrooms, obviously, because, like Clark said, it basically takes the people who have escaped the backrooms and creates, like, a manifestation of them, or, like, this creature of them with, like, their faces all messed up. And, yeah, so Mary escaped the backrooms, so therefore the backrooms takes Mary and basically, like, clones her and puts her in the backrooms as, like, this manifestation creature thing, and that's how the movie ends. And when that scene happened, I was sitting there like, all right, what the hell did I just witness? Because it was a pretty good movie, to say the least. Like, it was a very slow paced movie, but I still enjoyed it nonetheless. Because, like I said, you go from rooting for the main character to then being like, "Aye, bro, your ass gotta die." So it does a good job at kind of, playing with your emotions and that kind of thing. But overall, if I had to rate this movie, I think I would give it a maybe like a 7 out of 10. It was pretty dang solid, but I think I would prefer Obsession over the Backrooms just because Obsession is a bit more better paced in my opinion. Like I said, this movie is very slow paced, but this movie is also a bit more, I think, suspenseful than Obsession because, like I said, there are scenes where it just focuses in on something and you're just waiting for something to happen. And sometimes things do happen, and sometimes things don't happen. But another detail that I really like is that right at the very beginning, like I'm talking as soon as the movie opens, there's like this reference to the 4chan post, obviously, that like popularized the Backrooms, where it shows like the angle of like the 4chan post. It does that like right at the gate. As soon as the movie opens, it shows like this guy in a recording because he's like, where the hell am I? What's going on? And then he discovers the entity and dies. So yeah, I do like that they show the reference to the 4chan post a couple times in the movie because it happens more than once throughout the movie where it shows like that angle, and I do like that. But yeah, I think that's going to wrap it up for this video. We are only 11 subscribers away from 700. We're at 689. So if you haven't subscribed yet, make sure you subscribe. I'm trying to hit 700 subscribers by June, or like sometime in June. So if we can hit 700 in June, that would be pretty dang nice. But if you guys have gotten around to watching the Backrooms, let me know, and let me know if you prefer this movie, or Obsession, or any other horror movie that's came out this year. But yeah, I think that's where we wrap it up for this video, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace out.